Hello and welcome to the 23rd reading of the King James Bible, and we're in the book of Genesis, chapter 22. And as I mentioned to a friend of mine just before this live stream, I'm finding it extremely interesting reading through these, not with any preconceived idea or anything. It's something I've wanted to do since I was a kid and just never, I put it off. So now it's my chance to read through it, and whatever becomes of this becomes of it. I just find it interesting. So let's move on now. I'll open up the browser. And as I mentioned, we're at kingjamesbibleonline.org, chapter 22 of Genesis. Verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that the Lord did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and after him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, the clave of wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went upon the place of which the Lord had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood from the burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand, and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, the Lord will provide himself a lamb for the burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which the Lord had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife, and slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest the Lord, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and offered him up for the burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah, as it is said to this day, and in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the 2nd time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sands which upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in the seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned unto the young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. And it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, Behold, Michal, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. Uz has firstborn, and Buz his brother, and Chemel the father of Abraham, and Shest and Hazo, and Peel and Fildash, and Jelahash, and Bethel. And Bethel begat Rebekash. These 8 Mekash did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother. And his concubine, whose name was Ruhava, she bare also Teba, and Jeham, and Thahash, and Makash. Well, okay, so that's the classic story of Abraham being told to sacrifice his only son, and the result of it. I remember hearing that story as a kid. Okay, let's just see if there's some nuggets here. I'll go back to the verses. Back in verse 1, it kind of sets things up again. It says, and it came to pass after these things. Now, if you remember in the previous chapter how much went on between Abraham and Sarah and giving birth to this son, and the fact that Abraham had gone through casting out one of his servants. So that whole story. So now it goes into verse 2, and the voice of the, let's see, where does it say this? Yeah, well, I guess it's in verse 2, where it says, take now thy son, thy only son Isaac. Okay, so Abraham gets up in the morning, gets 2 other young men to join him, and takes his son Isaac, and away they go. And I guess it's quite a journey, because in verse 4 it says, by the 3rd day, I guess he was sleeping, he lifted up his eyes, and he figured out where the altar was going to be. And so now the whole section goes through where he's getting ready to, verse 6, he tells the young men to wait and look after the ass and whatever. And so Abraham and his son take the wood and the knife and whatever, and they start hitting off. And verse 7, I guess the son gets curious, says, and the son speaks to Abraham and says, "Where's the we got the wood for the fire and whatnot, but what are we going to sacrifice? Where's the lamb?" So the kid kind of figures out what's going on. This isn't, but goes along with it anyway. So Abraham doesn't lie to him, but sort of says, "Don't worry about it. One will be provided." So they go there, and Abraham gets ready in verse 10, gets ready to slay his son. And just at that moment, the Lord's voice comes through and says, Abraham, Abraham, don't do it. So this I find interesting. In verse 14, in verse 12, it says here, lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do anything to him. And now I know that thou fearest the Lord. So it was a test. And I'm not too sure how many times in the Bible there are tests, but there's definitely a test going on here. Then it goes into generations where Abraham gives the name of this location, and there's more conversation in verse 16 between Abraham and the angel and the Lord. And then more promising that his seed, his offspring, are going to be plentiful. And 18 talks about all the nations of the earth. So this is the genesis of all the nations of the earth. So in the last couple of verses, it gives sort of the genesis or the lineage. And it talks about some people, so there's some names of people there that we can look up later. But I noticed in 24, it uses a specific term, concubine. And that the concubine, I guess the kept women, she had children. So I guess back in those days, it wasn't unusual for a man to have a wife and then to have a concubine. So just interesting that this is popping up several times. Okay, well, that's it for verse 22, and tomorrow we'll go on for 23. I appreciate those watching and leaving comments, and we look forward to sharing this with you tomorrow.